Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Jay and John again. What's up, gentlemen?
Hey, how's it going?
I didn't like how you said again. It's almost like you didn't want us to be here.
No, the reason I say again is twofold. The first is that we generally have like a, slightly rotating host structure. So I'd say it's the fact that all three of us are here together 2 weeks in a row is worth mentioning, because this is going to be part 2 of our Objectives 101 episode. Last week we went over the core set objectives. This week we're going to go over the expansion objectives, which is priority supplies. So that would be Sabotage, and then the 3 vital assets objectives. And that's it. We're just going to continue in the same way our discussion of the objectives. So if you want to hear the first part of that discussion and you have not listened to last week, I would encourage you to go listen to that first and then come back and listen to this one.
The camera's bad. It's bothering me.
You're very blurry.
Yeah.
Fun technical difficulties here.
Yeah,
it looks okay now.
Sorry, Kyle. Sorry for our audio listeners who that didn't affect at all. But I don't care. It was bothering me.
All right. Before we get to the objectives, Jay, do you have any housekeeping for us?
Always, Kyle. Always. First, let's talk about Patreon. Yeah. Come join us on Patreon. Please, please, please. We've got some great awards rewards, not awards. Awards means you did something to achieve it. Rewards means you get it for being supporting. So rewards, we've got some great rewards going out this month. So for those of you that are at the $10 and $25 level on our Patreon, I'm going to be sending out the print and play of the Battle Force. For those of you that didn't get it already, we have a list of people we already sent it out to. I won't double send that. I'm also going to be sending the Gar, Sex, and Shield card to all of our Patreon members from the $5 and up level. And then for the people who have already gotten the Battle Force cards, we are going to do some errata cards this time around. And so for those of you that are behind a little bit on the quarterlies, you'll get those next time. And then also I came up with a really it's a revamped idea of surge tokens that we had done in the past of you remember Surge Cola? Yeah. So we're gonna do a variation of that, of surge tokens, but they're gonna be Surge Cola cans. So that's really fun. Plus we have the After Dark podcast on our Patreon. So not only do you get these quarterly rewards, you also get a podcast. We try to do it weekly. John and I have done it a few times. Evan and I have been doing it a few times. I think I haven't had Kyle on the After Dark in a while.
Once or twice.
Yeah. But maybe I'll get Kyle. Kyle's tough with all the children to scramble with, but we did our live Q&A last month. We're going to do another one this month. I'm going to teach Kyle how to record things on his computer so he can do a tactics seminar for this month. And so there's just tons of great benefits that you get with the Patreon, with the live Q&As, with the After Dark podcasts, and our cool rewards that we're going to be sending out. I'm also going to do, I think maybe the next quarter, I'm going to do unique order tokens that only Patreon members will get, and that'll be at the $25 level. So come join us on Patreon. You're really, what you're doing is not only are you getting these rewards and all this other content, you're also supporting the blog and the podcast and the staff, which is great. So your dollars directly contribute to the media that you're consuming, which is awesome. So there's that. The other thing is, if you're into story-based gaming and playing, we have our narrative campaign called Stormtide. You can go to stormtide.thefifthtrooper.com to check that out. And we are starting in our 3rd season, which new players can start in season 3 and I'm building in a system where you'll get caught up on the story and you'll get to play while our seasoned players get to continue their storyline as well. I really, would like you to go check that out. We have a monthly subscription model. You get minis, you get tokens, you get unique story, divergent narratives. It's really cool and a fun way to play Legion. And if you want to get on the Legion Discord, and I think I've said this before, but if you don't want to take it directly from me, you could go see what people are saying on the Discord. There's Stormtide channels where people are talking about Stormtide, and so you just ask them how much they like it or what they think of the game, and they'll let you know. It's really cool. We put a lot of work and time and effort into it, so I'd love for you guys to see it and check it out and get in on that. And I can tell you that we are gearing up to kind of in the next couple the end of this season 3 is going to kind of tie up where we've been going with the story, and we've got some really cool stuff coming up for season 4. So I'm really excited about that, so check that out as well. And then, I was thinking about this for people who don't know, and maybe you're listening to the Scoundrels for the first time or something. We're part of the Fifth Trooper Network, which you can find at thefifthtrooper.com. We have a store where we sell all kinds of tokens, and we sell Legion product. We have an amazing blog, and we have a ton of Legion tools like list builders and all of that you guys can check out. And so if you just go to thefifthtrooper.com, you can see all of that in a very easy to use navigational website. I'm just,
And if you're buying Legion products, is it SW Legion? Is that still a good promo code for Legion product from the store?
If you use SW Legion at checkout, you get 10% off Legion product.
Nice.
Yeah. And we do pre-orders for all the new stuff, and so you can do that. We also, if we're out of stuff, we do back orders. So like if you order something from the website that's on back order, it takes us between a week and 2 weeks to get it, but we'll get it in for you and ship it out to you. So we've got order tokens, we've got new designs that are coming out.
So many order tokens.
Yeah.
All the time. They're amazing.
We got new designs that are coming out in 2 weeks. They'll be shipping in 2 weeks. We also just launched our custom trays that we're going to be doing that you can represent your faction with. They're army trays. So like when you're at an event, you can carry your army around. Those are pretty cool. And yeah, lots of cool stuff.
Yep. All right. Well,
is that enough housekeeping for you, Kyle?
It's perfect, Jay. Whatever housekeeping you do, that's the perfect amount of housekeeping.
Yeah.
All
right. I like that answer.
Yeah. All right. How about we just dive right in?
Yeah.
So last week we did a bit more general. I mean, we talked about the 4 core set objectives specifically. We also did a bit more general discussion about like why objectives are important, how they help to set the tone for how the game is going to go, etc. We're not going to do all that on this episode because we did it on last episode. So we're going to just go straight in, and basically to remind folks for the format of kind of how we're going to talk about these. We'll talk about what the objective is generally, but then we'll also do like which units are good on these objectives, which units are less good on these objectives, and then if you're including these objectives in your deck, like which deployments should you be pairing them with or not pairing them with, and then also just kind of how do you generally approach these objectives, whether they're in your deck or not. If you end up having to play them, what is your approach to them? So without further ado, should we hit Sabotage, the moisture evaporators?
Yeah.
Real quick before we do that, just as a reminder, this is all based off of a blog post that Kyle did. So you could get that at thefifthtrooper.com under the blog. If you want to read along with us, or we're not reading this, but if you want to take a look at the cards and then see Kyle's insight into those. I'm sure you're gonna get some of that here, probably, right, Kyle? You're gonna give a little bit of insight on the cast. Yeah. All right, good.
Yeah. But also, I mean, you guys are here and you guys did not write the article. So I want to hear
that's
your
true.
Insight.
That is
yeah.
true.
I haven't written a blog article in a long time. It's been great. Yeah, Sabotage. I mean, auto take.
No,
I-
definitely not.
Really?
Yeah. So why don't we talk about what it is first, and then why? Because that'll
All
set
right.
up why it works the way that it works. Basically, each player places 2 objectives. The placement restrictions allow you to place them fairly close to your deployment zones.
Yep.
It's just range 1 to your zone, from your zone, range 2 from another evaporator. So often, not always, but often what happens, and then you interact with them repeatedly to either sabotage or repair them. Basically, you're either removing wound tokens from them or you're adding wound tokens to them. And one super 101 thing that I still often forget is, like, if you red or blue, which direction are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Red repairs.
Red repair is the way
Yeah.
to remember it. Red repair. It's alliterative. And then, of course, blue sabotages. So
My favorite thing is to say
Blue's the bad guy.
when we talk about it,
Yep.
right? When we're playing, I go, it doesn't really matter. Just we pick one of those and just do that and score based on that. Like that's that's what we'll do. Okay. And then the other
yeah.
player
Yeah.
is like, yeah, all right.
and it's worth noting too, like if your opponent gets mixed up or something and does it wrong one time, like let them just it's not legal for red to
Right.
sabotage, and it's not legal for blue to repair based on how the wording is in this objective.
Yeah.
I think it
Um,
is legal. But I did recently get it put in the forum. Because literally everyone has this
Okay.
either sabotage or repair. But so it's been FAQ'd that you can't.
Okay, so it was not necessarily originally that way, but now
Right.
is. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'd like to qualify what I just said. So when I said it doesn't matter, it's because generally we're going to talk about this, but generally you end up with a tie on these.
You still have to do them though,
Yep.
which I've seen people forget,
Yep.
just straight up forget, or B, like not allocate enough units to do it, and then you get near the end of the game and like the ones that you have left are somewhere else, or they have other things that they need to be doing, or they get tied
Yeah,
up and you're like,
that's fair.
oh, this isn't good.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that's the debate, right? Like, do you do this immediately? Like get yours taken care of immediately and then position for the rest of the battle, or do you hold? They both have their merits. I think it's just dependent on what you're facing.
Yeah, so let's talk real quick about, because you mentioned the tie.
Yep.
So I don't want to say generally, because there are plenty of VAPS games I've seen that actually do go to victory points.
Yep.
But I will say it is not uncommon for both players to safely interact with their VAPs and then for it to become essentially a game of kill points.
Yep.
Because you're in a situation where not that you can't reach your opponent's VAPs, but you would have to potentially lose a lot of units to do that, which is of course counterproductive on a game that has the potential to go to kill points, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So often VAPS plays out kind of like a poking is not the right word, because there can be some pretty big attack pools involved here, but essentially trying to vie for position in ways that allow you to take out one of your opponent's units.
Yeah.
And then once you've done that, you kind of have the upper hand. Now, of course, in a tie situation, if victory points are tied and kill points are tied, then blue player wins the kill points tie. Now, people see this dynamic and they're like, well, when does that ever happen? Like I've never seen kill points tied.
I have.
They haven't seen enough games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yes, but the answer is every game, because
At the
every
beginning.
game starts that way, right?
Mm,
Every game starts at 0-0 and 0-0, which means that every game starts with blue player winning if nothing happens.
Yeah. So it starts in the balls in red player's court to make that change.
Right. So if you are a red player and you are playing evaporators and your opponent is playing very defensively, you have to recognize essentially what they're doing, which is stalling. And you have to
Staying
kill something.
alive.
Yeah. Now there are
Uh-oh.
Cut
Uh-oh.
out briefly. Can't hear you.
No,
Hello?
you're
Oh,
back. You're back. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. I think
Yeah.
I just had
It was
My-
like 1 second of audio.
my kids have taken to playing with my recording stuff, and also
I blame you. specifically because before podcast, Kyle brings the kids over and is like, "Do you want to talk to Jay?" And then he puts them on there. So now I think they just think that that's all right. And
They've started also now playing with the green screen because they are fascinated by the fact that what they're seeing behind me is not what is actually behind me. This is an actual green screen, and they started before the cast like playing peekaboo with the green screen. One of them would be back here and be like,
my favorite is seeing your kids come on, sit on your lap, and then are going, huh, like looking back and forth, going, but Dad,
it like blows their mind.
Yeah,
my 6 and my 4-year-old. It's, and every time I have to explain to him, it's like it's green screen, it's an image that is projected, and they're just like,
not a mirror.
Yeah, so I have lots of different fun images too besides the Star Destroyer backgrounds that they find more entertaining. But yes, I apologize. What was I saying when I was cut out?
Well, talking about projecting, so blue player projects that they're playing, but they're not, they're stalling.
Right. Yeah. So as red player, you have to kill something if your opponent is playing like this. Luckily in this game, there are many ways to do that. There are lots of long range weapons that you can use for that. There are.
Now I'd like to go back to my original comment, auto include. And the reason I say that is because if you get, it doesn't matter if you're like at $7.99 or $800, because the likelihood of you getting blue player is smaller. But like, why wouldn't you just auto include this and ever? Because it's always blue player is winning, but from the beginning.
But not every list is capable of being defensive.
Every
list is capable of being defensive.
Not every list is good at it. So
okay,
there are basically.
I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
Mr. Authority.
It's easier to defend than it is to offend with every list.
Let me word this differently. There are certain types of lists, speeder lists with creature troopers, aggressive melee lists, where you have some combination of either a firepower disadvantage against like something that is more ranged focus, or units that are difficult to keep in one spot, or units that are not contributing if they're staying in one spot. Some combination of those means that you are less likely to be able to stay up on kill points in a defensive situation. Speeders A have to move, and B are fragile. To include being fragile to things like bombardments, other long range attacks like tanks, snipers. Speeders are hard to, even if you're good about like doing donuts, you can't like hide behind a line of sight blocker and dodge standby with a speeder.
All right, here's where I would argue this specific point with speeders. If you're running speeders for the most part, all right, we're going to talk about speeder bikes. Because if you're running any other speeders, maybe barks, but I don't know. I don't know what.
Great too.
What's that? Staps. Okay, yeah. Those are both, I think, speeder bikes and staps have a similar. If you're running those, you're running a highly aggressive list.
Yep.
And I think that tends to lean towards that kill point thing.
No, because those aggressive lists are built.
That's a hard no, Kyle. You think you're so smart? I can't wait to play you.
I'm as wrong as the next man.
I'm gonna get VAPs and I'm gonna shove it down your throat. Go ahead.
So let me put it this way. When I am running an aggressive list, I do not take VAPs.
All right.
And that is because most of those lists are designed to be aggressive in a way that wins on victory points. Because as many speeder / creature trooper players will tell you, it is not uncommon for those units to die by the end of the game in reasonably significant quantities. But because of what they've done, whether it's bombing run or whatever, they have made it much more difficult for your opponent to interact with or win on the objective. In the meantime, a lot of like the token version of this list is like the circa 2019 Tauntaun style list, where you would just rush your opponent with all your Tauntauns. Your Tauntauns would probably eventually all die, But by the time that happened, your opponent would be like back in the corner of their deployment zone, and it would be turn 5 or 6, and they'd be so far back that they couldn't interact with the objective.
So I would say specifically when you're talking about speeder and creature, you keep saying creature, but I think tauntauns is what you're referring to, because
And dewbacks.
I think dewbacks have a very specific. They have two modes. I found when I play dewbacks, you can have the aggressive mode, but you can also have the defensive mode with them as well. They do well with that, especially them only being one model that you're trying to hide. They have armor, like they have things to their advantage that are allow them to be a little bit more defensive. that
They're a
o-
little bit
over
better at
taunts.
it.
Yeah.
Part of it also is like you can only take 4 objectives, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm running a speeder list, like clearly you want bombing run and breakthrough.
Yep.
If I'm running a speeder list personally, I'm probably running Blizzard Force with Vader, which means I want hostage. And then it's like Vader's really good at payload and KP also, and so are speeders. So is it really that much better to take? So there's actually 2 things there. A, is it really that much better to take VAPs over one of those? Especially because like in that list, at the end of the day, you still have to do the VAPs, and VAPs do require thumbs to do. And that is a list that does not have a lot of thumbs. And all of your
You
thumbs.
always have at least your 3 core though.
Right, but in that list, 2 of your core are Storm HRTs, which you want to be aim shooting things and not like,
Yeah.
tinkering with a wrench, right?
But you could do it with 1 unit even.
You can't do 2 VAPs with 1 unit.
I do it all the time.
I would
Takes
prefer
one turn
not
to
to
move
do,
between them.
Let me
It's
put
like
it this way.
4 rounds, I think, to do it. Maybe 3 rounds. No, it's 4 rounds.
It takes 2 rounds to move between them, and it takes 2 moves to move between them. So that's a full round, and it
It's
takes
just less than 2 moves, right? If they're exactly 2 apart and your base is on one side, then you get it less than 2 moves, less than 12 inches.
But if you're playing, in my example, Blizzard Force, your extra core are snowtroopers.
Well,
Here's my
their fault.
problem. You're really looking at this sabotage the moisture evaporators from Blizzard Force perspective.
Well, I'm using it as an example because it is probably the
I think
clearest.
it's a bad example.
Well, your term,
speeders?
if I'm not mistaken, was
Auto include. Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
You're one dumb list. Probably shouldn't take sabotage, but the rest of them should.
I do want to put a caveat as we started saying that all aggressive lists don't like sabotage.
I don't know about all aggressive lists.
Oh,
Okay.
now he's backing off. Yeah, you
Because-
see that?
Because I've played a lot of aggressive red player lists, a lot of Wookiees, a lot of Luke, a lot of just throwing things at my opponent. And one of the great things that they do on sabotage is they can get your points. They could hit if they're up in your face, that means turn 6, when you've ran away or whatever, they could also just hit your evaporator once and win. No matter how much has died.
Yeah,
Or Luke can do it.
I think that's true of a aggressive list that has a lot of trooper units with thumbs in it, where the things that you're charging your opponent with are a force user and or some quantity of Wookiees. If you're going after your opponent with like Vader and a bunch of dewbacks, if they kill Vader, like the dewbacks can kill stuff, but they can't do the VAPs.
Right.
So yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm not saying that these kinds of lists are incapable of playing VAPs, but they definitely don't exemplify the blue player VAP advantage in the same way as like a like a longer range list that is good at eliminating activations from a distance.
Yeah, they don't turtle.
Yeah.
It's not even about turtling. It's about effectively poking from long range.
Blah, 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 blah. No, it is about turtling a little bit because I think, okay, here's why I say auto include. All right. Because if you potentially have a table that's advantageous, well, speeder bikes may be an outlier of this. So I'll give you that. Okay. But I think if you have a table side that's advantageous to hiding things that you can't really poke and eliminate entire units, then why wouldn't you do this?
Let me use another example.
Oh boy.
If you have a list with 1 or more FD turrets, is VAPS a good objective for you?
Yes.
What do you think, John?
No.
Why is that?
I'm not going to say it's good for you or not good for you, but your FDs are less likely to participate because your opponent has no incentive to move forward into their fixed range, and your FD turrets can't touch the VAPs.
So right. So I agree with you, but for a different reason.
Okay.
And it is because you cannot retreat an FD turret. So in my experience, and yes, I have in fact run FD turrets. FD turrets can be kind of a liability on VAPs because if your opponent has like an AAT or an ATST,
It's hung out to dry.
or an unlimited range sniper like Iden or Cassian, you can't retreat that FD. So they start plinking wounds off of it. That's going to be, that FD turret is going to turn into your point deficit basically.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
just something to think about.
Well, let me give you something to think about.
I'm glad we opened with VAPs. This is great.
Yeah. So FD falls in the same line as eWebs for me, right? And I've played both as well, but like 65 points, maybe a little bit more if you give them, if you're giving them, so 68 maybe, right? Unless you're going to give them some other bull crap like emergency transponders. So let's call it 72. So like 72 points. If you're really, there's only a few things that are going to be able to get to that FD that the FD can't get back to. And so if you're like Iden, Cassian, what's his Din coming up, right? There's only going to be 3 units maybe that can get an FD that an FD can't get back, positioning aside. And so if you're really going after an FD, and if I'm playing FDs, I'm playing more than one. So if I've done this correctly, then you're positioning yourself where, sure, you may get off a couple shots with like a sniper, but I'm going to delete at least one of those minis and make your life even harder before you can kill the turret.
I don't think sniper team, like conventional sniper teams, are very good against FDs.
But I guess what I'm saying is any list that has an FD, if it's designed properly, you're going to have things that are going to be able to return that fire. And I hear what you're saying, but I think also, I think there's smarter ways of playing that list that like you shouldn't really have an FD in a position where it's just getting plinked to death by 30 different things without you returning fire. Like the idea in my head whenever I'm playing an FD turret or something of that like that is to position it in a way where I want you to come try to shoot it. And then I'm going to position to then kill whatever that just came up to try to kill it. And so in that case, VAPS is still good for me because maybe you get 70 points, but I'm going to get 100.
Maybe. I mean, you're still putting yourself in a position where, I don't know, like you're putting yourself in a position as blue where you have to kill one of your opponent's units.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so to Kyle's point, say you've got a FD against, I don't know, an ATST even, and the 2 FDs are plinking down that ATST real good because they've got native impact, and maybe the ATST gets an FD cannon, maybe it doesn't, but the ATST can just step out of range and be like, all right, I'm done fighting. It's not going to work out for me. And the FD cannon can't.
Yeah, I just find it a liability because you cannot retreat it. So if it comes down to kill points, if your opponent wants to focus on that, then that puts you as blue player in a position where you have to kill something. Which
I think that's fair. And I think what we don't want to conflate here is I think that's also dependent on what your opponent is playing. So like,
oh sure,
you know what I mean? So like, I don't think that stops it from being an auto include. I think it stops it from being a pick while you're, or trying to get around it from being a pick, during selection. I still think it's an auto include.
Let me introduce one more variable, which I think speaks to this conversation.
Well, Kyle's a good arguer. He just keeps going. He just
this is what I do.
he can't be wrong. Let's go. Come on.
No, and this is, you can find all of these things, by the way, in my article. All of these points that I'm making.
Oh, because you
Should've
wrote the
studied this article
article. Now
beforehand.
we have to listen. I
No,
don't think
I'm just
so.
saying, like, I'm not bringing these up as a way to belabor the argument.
All right,
These
all
are
right.
already things that have been brought up.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
By you
so-
in your article.
correct. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Which wasn't
Um,
proofread by me, by the way. So just, you know.
no, just me.
Yeah.
Because I'm the editor. Anyway, hemmed in.
Yeah.
So hemmed in is, yeah, you say yeah. What's there's that yeah seemed like pregnant with meaning. What please
So
do go on.
I
I've said nothing except hemmed in.
I'm guessing you put this in your article. I haven't read this, but I think a lot of people avoid hemmed in with Sabotage, and I think that's a mistake. I think hemmed in and Sabotage were born to be together
As blue or red?
as blue.
Hemmed in as blue?
Yeah.
So that has not been my experience.
All right.
Because if you're running Sabotage in your list, it means that you are hoping to set up a situation where you can defend and or win on kill points, probably.
Mm-hmm.
With hemmed in, you start A, very close to each other.
Mhm.
But B, because of how the deployment zones worked, if you're on VAPs, it tends to like push the VAPs even further out towards your opponent's deployment zone. And also the way that the hemmed in zones tend to fall on tables, they do it often in a way that I don't quite know how to, like, a lot of TOs when they're setting up tables don't visualize hemmed in when they're setting up like line of sight blockers and stuff like that. So, while you might have like a battle lines or long march situation where there's like reasonably well placed line of sight blockers that you can put your VAPs behind, I have not found that to be true on hemmed in, both because of how the zones push out those eligible areas, but also just generally because of how the terrain is laid out. So hemmed in as blue on VAPs, to me, has always come down to the victory points and an actual fight over the evaporators themselves, because they are usually within reach of red player, A, and B, because of where red player and blue player start on hemmed in, red players can have access to your units as
Okay.
blue player.
So then I guess what I want to say with this is that, and maybe I was too strong in my wording earlier, but I think in all the lists that I have played, which are aggressive lists, being blue player and hemmed in has seemed to work out for me with Sabotage, because I find that let's say I deploy my moisture evaporators to the left side of that table, right? They start to focus their deployment in that left one, and then they put because of the nature of where they have to be spread out, theirs end up going more towards the middle and to the right. I'm just as a scenario, right? And then they light load that right deployment, and so you can generally get theirs and the kill points. Well, and you kind of do like oh, look over here. I'm gonna go this way. And you can, and that, I guess that probably doesn't work with all lists. That's probably more aggressive Jedi lists, double heavy lists, like that sort of stuff all works with that. But yeah, but I guess it makes more sense if you're like looking at like strictly a gun line, maybe.
Yeah, usually, I guess that's a long way of saying, if I'm running something that's more like a defensive list, like a force user gun line, and I'm running evaporators, I usually do not include hemmed in.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because of the way that the vetoes work. Your opponent can often force a situation where, like, if you want to play VAPs, you also end up playing hemmed in. And then, to me, with a defensive force user gun line, that kind of defeats the purpose of having VAPs in your deck in the first place. And then the second
hemmed in
component
is so great for most of the other blue player objectives.
Well, that is part two of this, which is if I'm running something with some like speeder bikes, Hemmed In is great for Payload as blue. It's great for KP as blue. It's
Hostage,
great for Hostage as
Recover.
blue. It's great for Recover as blue. It's great for almost everything except Sabotage.
Yeah.
And if you're running those objectives, you know, like Bombing Run or Breakthrough or Hostage or Recover or whatever, or Payload, you want to have a situation where Hemmed In is in your deck and your opponent has to be like, well, do I want to play Payload and Hemmed In, or do I want to play Bombing Run? I was, in fact, this happened in my last Invader game, because again, I'm going to use Blizzard Force. I'm playing Blizzard Force in round robin
Gross.
for Invader, so this is why this is on the brain.
You're a mean person.
I am a very mean person, and so far I've played. I went in cold, by the way, and I don't mean that as a pun. I had not played Blizzard Force
Boo.
before.
You absolutely meant that as fun. Come on.
Boo.
There's no way you said that without knowing what you were saying.
Let me rephrase. I had previously not played Blizzard Force. I played it for round robin. I've played 2 games. Both of those games have been full tables by turn 4. That doesn't happen normally with me, certainly, but with Legion generally. Blizzard Force is crazy, but part of it is the way that battle deck shakes out, because in like my second game, I do not have evaporators in my deck. I have Bombing Run, Breakthrough, Payload, and Hostage. And it was a situation where I basically how the cards laid out. Hemmed In was 3rd slot, and then I had those 4 objectives along the top. And I think Bombing Run was like, it was like Hostage, Breakthrough, Bombing Run. No, sorry, it was Payload, Breakthrough in the first 2 slots in the Bombing Run. So basically, like, I double vetoed to Hemmed In, and then my opponent had to either play Bombing Run against the speeder list on Hemmed In, play Payload on Hemmed In as red, which regardless of what your list type is terrible, or play Breakthrough on Hemmed In against the speeder list. And he chose Breakthrough, which I think was probably the least bad of those options. But my point is, like, if I had Sabotage in my deck, Sabotage would have been up there somewhere, and that would have been like the clear, obvious choice in that situation. Whereas by excluding Sabotage, I created a situation where, like, for red player, all of the objectives are not great on Hemmed In. So yeah.
All right.
I'm
Why
just
didn't
saying,
he veto Hemmed In?
because I might be mixing up the order of objectives on the top. I think if he had vetoed Hemmed In, he would have ended up on like Disarray, Bombing Run or something like that. Yeah. I don't remember the exact order of how it played out, but it was definitely like do I play Bombing Run against the speeder list on like Disarray or Battle Lines, or do I play Hemmed In Breakthrough? So
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I guess Hemmed In. Yeah, that's probably your best bet with that, with those options. At least you
Right.
can hold it down a little bit, maybe.
yeah. So I get what you're saying, Jay, and I think most of the time,
Do you, Kyle?
yeah.
Because I just heard like a 20-minute diatribe about how you didn't get what I was saying.
whenever I hear auto take, it's like I feel like that
A
like
red
triggers
flag.
something in me, because that's such
Yeah.
a hyperbolic statement.
Yeah.
I think it is a most of the time.
Well, what are we doing here if we're not saying crazy stuff?
No, I love that you said that, because it got us to talk about Sabotage for
All this
30
stuff.
minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's
Jeez,
and I guess that's fair, right? Because I think it's auto. I guess we're all looking at it from our own perspectives, right? Like you're very deep into Blizzard Force, so you're like, what about speeders?
Yeah,
That's
fair.
my impression of you.
Yeah.
And so you're like,
Speeders are like my new. I'm not typically a speeder player.
Yeah.
I played them for SoCal, but that's about it.
But I guess
speeders.
yeah, it's what frame of reference you're coming in, right?
Yeah,
I think every list I've played, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm taking this. Yeah. So anyways, all right, yeah, we can move on.
I think it's the
I
right call for
often-
most lists.
I often don't take it as blue just because it's boring.
That's fair too.
Like,
I don't actually think
not-
it's boring, but
Do you know
I
what
get
I've
that.
come to realize, knowing Kyle for all these years? Sometimes boring wins games.
Yeah, I know, but
I
I'd
think some
rather
of
have a
my-
fun game sometimes than
To me,
play 2 hours of boring.
all right. Let me defend the entertainment value of Sabotage for a second.
I'm gonna tear this
Um,
one down, so go for it.
So it looks like we're only doing one objective this
Yes.
episode.
Yeah, right.
Of
This
the
is the
podcast.
Sabotage episode. We can breeze through some of the next ones.
Yeah.
So, to me,
I'm ready.
Sabotage is like the difference between a baseball game that involves a lot of like, quote unquote small ball. So like bunts and singles and, like clutch strikeouts and sacrifices, and like a game that ends like 2-1, where like the whole game is close the entire time. There's not a lot of like crazy big plays with home runs or anything like that, but there's always like these small jockeys for position, and you steal second base, and that's a big moment because suddenly you have someone in scoring position. To me, that's what Sabotage is because of how narrow it is between like I'm winning versus suddenly I'm losing. You lose a strike team, that's 48 points, suddenly you're losing, and now you need to do something, and then you go and you kill a 52-point naked phase 1, and then suddenly you're winning, and then your opponent has to do something. Like the swings are constant, they're small but they're constant, and both players are in the game all the way up until the last moment. Whereas like a home run steroid era baseball game where it's like both teams are clocking home runs and grand slams left and right, the final scores are going to be 12-8, and for some significant period of the game one team is going to have basically no chance of winning. To me, Sabotage is like small ball baseball, where extremely minute positioning decisions matter a lot. Getting like killing a handful of models on a vulnerable unit matters a lot. Basically, to me, Sabotage is the situation where like small changes, small positioning mistakes, or small positioning moments of brilliance are kind of exemplified, instead of just like watered down and gone through in the wash.
Kyle, for you, you literally told John that you were going to explain how it was fun, and nothing you said was fun. It was all not fun, and I'd rather watch a game with a bunch of home runs.
Well, even that baseball game that Cal described sounds well. I could survive through that, and I was sitting here trying to think of what sport would be comparable to my view of Sabotage, and sports aren't that boring. So Sabotage,
Golf.
this is my thing.
It's
Most
golf.
games of Sabotage incentivize you to not play. They incentivize blue player to hit the VAP and run. And then you I mean, is it not true?
Kyle's playing 3D.
If you have an
chess while
LOS
we're playing
blocker,
regular chess over here.
then
John.
why would you not hide?
Yeah.
You win if you hide.
Only if you can actually protect your VAPs.
Okay, yeah.
You can't shoot your
Where
opponent's
are
units if
you
you're
playing
hiding.
Legion that you haven't been able to hide and protect your VAPs? Like,
Right.
where are you playing?
There are
Legion?
games that happens on, but that has not been.
What
my
is the
experience.
percent of that?
I have had some fun VAP games. I've had great Yoda VAP games where I get to my opponent's Vaporator and I double hit it and it's hilarious.
Sorry, Kyle, you're outnumbered on
But
this one. We're not letting you win.
I recognize that people don't like VAPs. I think if there's like one objective in the deck that is okay, that is decent for a defensive list, that's fine.
When the smart play is for me to not engage, that's
I think you're overselling how often that is actually the smart play on VAPs. But
I don't know.
I know
Well, and I
everybody's
didn't
had like
say-
that one experience.
I didn't say I didn't like VAPs. I just disagree
I don't like it.
on how to play it. I said it
Yeah.
was an auto include. I mean, that says something.
I personally think VAPs is fun.
All right. Well, let's
But-
start back at the top. Let's start this. Let's talk about VAPs. I've changed my mind on it. I'm just kidding.
Let's talk about a different objective.
we
We
can
talked
move
about
on.
VAPs for this is gonna be the VAPs 101 episode, and
Yeah.
then like 9 minutes of 3 other objectives.
Yeah. Vital assets. Let's move into vital assets. Let's
All right,
start
how
with
about-
bombing run.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So bombing run, good for speeders, vehicles, creature troopers.
Yeah, can we talk? Let's talk about why real quick, because there are a couple of rules nuances to bombing run that kind of get lost in the shuffle.
right.
So of course each each player starts with 3 bombs.
Yep.
You have to deliver them within range 1 of your opponent's deployment zone. Within, of course, meaning entirely within.
Yep.
As it does always in Legion. And you can only detonate 1 bomb a round. Furthermore, units with thumbs, that would be normal trooper units, can pick up bombs that have been dropped. But vehicles and anything else without thumbs cannot. However, those units can start with bombs because there is no restriction on what types of units you can give bombs to at the start of the game.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm glad you brought that up because I think I see that in the Discord or on the Facebook group. Like, it seems like every month or something, someone's like, I don't understand bombing run. How can you start it on the speeder bike if they can't claim it? It's like, because the way it's worded is it already starts pre-claimed. So you're not
It
actually
starts claimed.
taking the claim action.
Right.
There
Starting
are
blue player, each player
Yeah.
places 3 claimed objective tokens in base contact with friendly unit leaders.
there are 2 restrictions to worry about. You can only have 1 per unit, and be careful if you're a vehicle heavy list and you also opt for rollout. Because if you're not inside your deployment zone, you cannot start with a claimed bombing run objective.
Yep. Also, advanced positions, something to be aware of.
Yes.
Make sure you leave, if you got like a bunch of troopers in your list, make sure you leave some of them in your deployment zone so you can give them bombs.
Yes.
Yeah. So very good for fast vehicles, creature troopers, anything that's fast, because this is there's 2 reasons for that. The first is they also blow up and damage your opponent's units. So you can do like a speed or triple move into the middle of your opponent's army at the end of a turn and score a point and blow everything up. But since it's a 1 per turn detonate, you can't just like kind of slow roll it to your opponent's deployment zone and then detonate 3 bombs on the last turn.
You have a timer, kind of like some of
Yep.
the other ones we talked about. You
Right.
have to start scoring by round 4.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going to get to these 6 rounds, even if your rounds are taking a long time, then you may be screwed if you waited till round 4.
Yep. So if you got a trooper base list and you're somehow forced to play bombing run, you got to get moving.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like
High
from the
activations
word
help
go.
a ton here too, because then you can that's the real time where you can drop it in your opponent's face. When you could activate after your opponent has activated everything.
If
and
you
then-
have a unit that's fast enough to do that.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're within range 3 of their deployment zone and you could double move drop.
Yeah.
So let
I
me,
will s-
okay, here's something. What is the difference between using the free action drop and then dropping the token by death?
One scores and blows up and the other doesn't. At all.
Right.
Accurate.
So
If you die, then the token is unclaimed, but you did not drop it. And it has a stipulation. It has to be dropped with the
Mhm.
drop ability to then detonate.
Yep.
So your opponent can pick it up, or you could pick it up. Anyone can
Yep.
pick it up with
right. So
thumbs.
I wanted, because that's been
Yeah.
something that's come up where like I've killed speeder bikes, right? Right. And then someone's like, well, I'm just gonna blow it up. Like,
Yeah, it's not how it works. You have to actually take the drop
Yeah.
free action,
yep.
which is relevant for speeder bikes in one more important way. And that's you have to actually, it's free, but you still have to do the free action. And if you compulsory move at the end of your turn, since you can compulsory move
yeah.
at the beginning or end of your turn, that's at the end of your activation. So you cannot drop a bomb after a compulsory move on bombing
Right.
run
If
which-
it's your end compulsory.
if it's
Yeah.
your end compulsory move.
You could start with the compulsory
and then drop it.
but-
Yeah, because that's still during your turn.
Right.
But that's relevant because speeders can only displace units on their compulsory move. Meaning, like, if you want a triple move into the middle of your opponent's army, but there isn't some place for your speeder to fit in that spot, then that's not going to work. I was playing Snyder in the SoCal final, and this situation came up because he had a unit with a standby token, and he double moved a speeder with the intent to triple move and then drop it. And with my standby, I moved a bunch of trooper units to like basically zone the spot that he was going to.
Body block.
I body blocked it, and then he could either sit his not drop his bomb in a way that scored, or try and survive for another turn and then drop it next turn. He chose to drop it and then just blow it up in a way that didn't score because he didn't anticipate the speeder surviving to the next turn. But that ended up setting the tone for the game, because then that meant that he could only score 2 bombs and I could potentially score 3.
Right.
So, yeah, highly relevant for both speeder players and not speeder players, which is that it is possible to body block them.
So what I think the takeaway from that, besides actually doing that, I think the second takeaway from that is make sure when your opponent's playing speeders that they're calling out when they're using compulsory.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're playing speeders, make sure to announce it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's because I know a lot of, listen, we play this all the time. We've gotta be vigilant with saying, hey, this is my compulsory move, this is my standard move, because that can become important.
Very important.
Yeah.
All right. One more relevant thing on bombing run is that if your opponent has bombs that are on trooper units, choke is pretty good as his force push for the same reasons they are in recover, right? Is you can force them to get drops. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Toss them basically 2 actions, right? Because they drop it and they're gonna have to move to it again to pick it up.
And if you're against like Maul or something like that, he can also double move claim. So Maul can do like the double move, force push the token in base contact with him, choke the unit leader, and then claim it. And then if you're not within range 1 of your own deployment zone, drop it and then blow it up. Which often that happens, it's going to be near or in your opponent's deployment zone.
Yeah, an irrecoverable.
That's a game loss right there.
Yeah.
So be aware of that.
Man, I wish light side force users were cooler.
Anakin's pretty cool.
Yeah, because he could choke.
Although you don't often take that on him. But yes, I see your point. Yoda's cool. Jedi
Choke
Luke
is
cool.
so much better than Mind Trick.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We got gypped. That's what I'm saying.
I think the conversation was different when you could target operatives and commanders.
It was, yeah, I agree.
I see why you can't. I get it. But yeah, we need more light and dark side force powers.
Agreed. All right, hostage exchange. Ready to move over? All right,
let's do it.
Hostage exchange. All right, so basically each player chooses a core unit that they control. Starting with blue, they place your opponent's chosen unit on or as near as possible to the middle of the board and do a speed 1 move with that unit. Then they place a claimed objective token in base contact with the unit leader of that chosen unit, and they get the hostage upgrade card, which means they can only move speed 1. They can't attack during the first round, or they can attack. They can't be attacked during the first round. Units cannot use the detonate keyword during round 1. So you can't like Sabine bomb them and kill them. And then all troopers gain the claim.
I think the only thing minefield would affect them, wouldn't it? Is that the only thing?
Because
I don't
it's not
think
an enemy
that's
effect.
It is
not
not an enemy
detonate.
effect, and it is not detonate.
Yeah, I think minefield works still.
And then you get a victory point for the objective token that's claimed by a unit they control. Then each player gains 1 victory token for each objective token that is within their deployment zone and claimed by a unit they control.
So I think I want to claim that if you have a force user, it's an auto include. Because against a non-force user list, it's very easy to win.
I say only if you have force push.
I mean, if you don't have force push, then you better be Palpatine, or like, I don't know why you did it.
I'm just saying. Some people don't take force push. I don't know. If you don't have force push, don't take this card.
Sure. Well, but Palpatine without force push would still be great just because he nukes things and pulling the strings.
Yeah. I
That's
think
fair.
that's right in that if you're taking a force user that isn't Palpatine, you should be taking force push. And if you're
Yeah.
taking Palpatine, he's still pretty good at hostage. So if you have
Yeah.
a force user, you should include hostage. I agree with
Yeah,
that.
I think there's and they're two different games, right? And I think with the force user, I think if you're forced into this against the force user, Kyle and I played this game before, and we basically both had force users, and so we put I put or you put a mortar and I put an MK on the hostage so that there wasn't any force user shenanigans going.
You can still push him,
Yeah.
and you can still choke him, but they won't.
It's
The
not the same.
multi-wound model will not immediately drop the hostage when you use choke on him.
Yeah, and I think this was on stream. Evan at Adepticon did this with Vader, where he basically force push, moved one of the miniatures way out, based him for he kept doing that and moving it back into his
Just walked him back to the deployment.
Yep. Yeah, Vader doesn't even have to claim it in that situation. He just kind of picked, essentially picks up the guy with the hostage and just carries him
Yeah.
back to your deployment zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those
Force
force
users are really
users
good
can
hostage.
do that sort of thing just by you force push it and then you cohere model even farther and then you go base that.
Yep.
And so that's 8 inches of movement you've created in whatever direction you want
Yeah.
for
Basically,
one action.
I mean, there's essentially two reasons that this is the quote unquote force user objective. Force push is definitely the biggest one because it's one of the few abilities in the game where you can move your opponent's units. But also just melee is really good on hostage. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess even though they can shoot, I mean, you really don't.
You don't want to.
You just want to move. Just run. That's what you want to do.
I think there are some situations clearly if you can do both, if your unit has relentless, if it snows or something like that, then you might
Yeah.
as well. If you have Yoda, you can use Yoda's 2-pip to do this. And you can also guidance them.
Yeah,
just for good measure.
Yeah, I guess
Yoda 1
but-
pip to double guidance them.
Yeah.
right. I guess shooting at the
expense of
an
Yeah.
action is not ideal.
Not usually a good idea.
Right.
Yeah. There might be a situation where you have a particularly beefy unit that you made your hostage, like a Black Sun unit or a B2 or something, and you can get a shot off, and then potentially, depending on where the terrain is, maybe you can hide behind something with just one move.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen a couple times, but generally, as a rule, it is better to just, until your hostage unit is safe, just keep double moving with them.
Yep. Yeah, and ideally you want to this was something I learned from Nima during our match with Recover the Supplies is covering the ball. And basically what I mean by that is what he would do when we were doing Recover was he would double move to get it towards another unit and then get that other unit near the Recover, so that if your opponent takes down the one unit, you've got one right there that can go ahead, claim, and then keep moving the ball forward. And I think that's a great move with hostage as well, where you just, once you can get it close to a unit where it's safe, then you kind of double move, you have both your units covering the hostage while it's in danger, so that if one drops it, you have somebody immediately able to pick it up and keep moving.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed. That's a great strategy on both those objectives. Yeah. Anything else to say about hostage?
I would say that it's often overlooked, and so be careful with hostage that when you pick up that hostage, you get a little condition card that changes you. And everyone knows, it reduces your speed by 1. It increases your courage by 1, but it also prevents you from starting melees. So if you're a force user that went for your opponents or your own hostage and ended up picking it up midway through the game, you've given up your ability to start melees, which means you're just running away, or you're throwing your lightsaber, or you're pushing someone into melee with you.
Right. That last one's important because
Yes,
when you do a force
doable.
push, it is not you that's starting the melee. It is
It is
the
the
unit
other.
that is being force pushed. It's the unit that is moving that is starting the melee.
Yes.
So,
tricky. Force users.
Yes.
Yeah, force user shenanigans. Hostage
So
summary.
many.
Force user shenanigans.
Hostage great with snow troopers
Yep.
because you're already moving at
Yeah.
speed 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're relentless.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
well,
Steady.
not relentless. They have steady.
Study.
Yeah, nice try.
right.
Yeah,
You're right.
Empire always trying to get those little
two different
advantages.
things. Those are completely different things.
Yep, that's true. That's 100% accurate. Okay. Payload.
Yeah,
Payload.
I-
Payload's a fun one. I like Payload.
this was very confusing to me when it first came out. Actually, for a while after it came out. So this came out right at the beginning of the pandemic or during the pandemic. So we weren't getting a lot of reps with this one. And we could talk about it, but basically the biggest thing to know is that these don't care about terrain. Just to be clear, they go over everything. They just draw a line and they go that way. They hover. So
Yeah.
just we could talk more, but that's my big
Yeah, they explicitly ignore might be the wrong word. They move over terrain of all heights.
Yeah.
So yeah, height 4, building, wall, whatever, they just go straight over it. Which I think is good for, clearly there's some theme / visual weirdness with that, but I think it's good for balance reasons because it wasn't when Payload first came out, it was not clear how that worked, and there were a couple situations where like it ruled that they couldn't, move up heights or whatever, and then people would just put their payload destinations like in weird spots where essentially the payload couldn't get there. So
Yeah.
I think it's much better for balance reasons that this is the case. It's also notable that they do displace only at their end point,
Like a compulsory move.
like a compulsory move for a repulsor vehicle. Yeah. But you cannot block them with trooper models. You can block them, at least their final spot, with vehicles and emplacement notched base minis, basically.
Yes. And troopers in melee.
And troopers
you
in melee.
Manage to finagle where that is.
Yeah. So kind of edge
If you have a
facing,
Jedi.
but there are ways where like, I find Payload is often an extremely close objective where it comes down to, a game of inches, whether you can get your payload into that next range band or not. And there are times when blocking a payload with something like, the one spot that your opponent can actually get to that range band with like even a mortar or something like that is extremely relevant. So,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what units / lists are good at Payload and which ones are bad at it? If
So
any.
there's a lot of units that are good at it, but this is another one where Jedi really shine. Between the fact that they can push units every turn, if you have Master of the Force, you could push a unit out of scoring range, starting around, round 3 or 4, once the payloads are kind of like crossing, as they typically will.
Yep.
Then you could always inch that, or you could switch that count by 1, just for free action.
Yeah, heavy units are really good because it's unit leader that can achieve the objective. So
vehicles.
Yeah, you just put a tank or a couple ATSTs around that thing. You're going.
Yeah. I like speeders on Payload because you can often do like a surprise freeze of your opponent's payload.
Yes. Yes.
It's not
Speed
uncommon.
3. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not uncommon for your for players to just kind of like do the first couple turns of like slow rolling a payload with just 1 or 2 scoring units. And you can kind of dunk on your opponent a little bit if they've got like 2 scoring units just kind of pushing their payload forward. At the end of a turn, just dump 2 speeders in that zone from across the map, basically. And then suddenly you've frozen their payload. And often freezing your opponent's payload even once, assuming you
Often
can keep
enough.
yours moving is enough to basically secure a win. So units that can surprise freeze a payload are good, like speeders.
Tauntauns don't get 3 actions, but they do get, or 3 moves, but they do still get 2 speed 3 moves on their medium-sized base. So they've also got that surprise element sometimes. It may be a little more obvious that it's coming, but
Yeah, I saw somebody do it with Leia's No Time for Sorrows, where they like moved them and
That's
then
true.
like got just the space
Mhm.
that they needed with that speed one move to lock it down. That was something crazy I saw.
even FD cannons have a place in payload. Now, obviously, when you bring FD cannons, you're trading. You don't have units that are escorting your payload anymore, but you know where your enemy has to bring his payload before you deploy, so you know where their army is going to be at least for like 3 rounds of the fight, and so you could deploy your FD cannon to get shots and try and hopefully turn that tide, but you're down a unit. It's not a unit that can escort the payload.
Should we talk real quick about where to drop your payload?
Yeah.
So this is not something that's immediately obvious, but since your opponent gets to choose your destination after you put your payload down, you basically want to put it like as close to, generally speaking, as close to the center of the map as possible.
Yes.
Bearing in mind, of course, where the deployment zones are. But like if you're on battle lines, you want to put it like smack dab in the middle of that battle line zone as far forward as possible. If you're on major offensive, you want to put it in that little panhandle corner that's like next to the middle, as far up as possible. Because they don't move very fast. So like you might need all 6 turns of moving a payload, even from that central location, to get to a spot that your opponent picks. I've seen players put them like in the fat part of the major offensive zone, and then their opponent just picks a terrain piece that's like on the far, from your perspective, that's your major offensive zone on the far left side of the map, and then they've got to move that payload like 65 inches or something, which not going to happen.
Right.
So there are probably a couple of exceptions, but especially since the payload provides its own cover, that's also something we didn't mention. Payloads provide heavy cover. You want to drop it like as far forward, as far close to the center of the map as possible, because you don't know which terrain piece your opponent's going to pick.
So this means if you are a red player, you have the ability to prevent this. Absolutely, always prevent hemmed in payload, because you have
if
nothing
you're
close
red.
to the middle. If you're
Yeah.
red, if you're blue, I mean, if you can get that to happen, great.
Yeah.
But red player can always prevent it, and you always should.
Yeah, you can put it kind of in the corner of that, like, you have the 2 red zones that butt up towards the middle, but then your opponent has all that space in the diagonals opposite
So
you
much
to
space.
pick a terrain piece, and their payload's going to be right in the middle of the map. So
You
basically,
will easily be 7 to 10 inches farther that you have to move.
Yeah, at least. Basically, like your opponent's playing on a 3x3 and you're playing on a 6x4 for payload, and that's not good. So
no, that's not good at all.
No, it's not. 6x3, sorry, not a 6x4.
Other
But you
units
got
that
what I
are
mean.
We
great,
knew what you meant.
Yeah.
melee units really shine in payload.
Yep.
Because you have 2 rounds. You typically have about 2 rounds where you could avoid shooting with proper LOS blockers and still escort your payload. And then by rounds 3 or 4, your opponent has to be near that payload. So they're going to be close to charging range. So those, the IGs and the Magna Guards, or IGs, the Magna Guards and the Royal Guards and the Wookiees, all of them have a real good time to shine with payload.
Yeah, it's basically, there's generally 2 ways it plays out. Either you do like a toilet bowl, where your payloads just kind of pass like 2 ships passing in the night, depending on where the objectives are. But much more commonly, you get a situation where at some point the payloads are going to like crash into each other. Payload, very much like hostage, is an objective that kind of sets up a confrontation at short range. So yeah, if you have aggressive short range units, payload's going to be pretty good for you too. So
Any units that are bad on payload?
Gun lines aren't great.
Yeah, stuff that doesn't like to move. Because you have to move to escort a payload.
Right.
Rebel troopers.
Strike teams are not great at it.
Yeah. Anything
Right.
with white dice and not enough dodges.
Yeah.
Strike teams are not great at it.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to contribute directly to scoring because they're too fragile to be up in the mix like that.
Yeah. Droids are disgusting at it because they have so many bodies. Like, I mean, you got to kill them, and they're just gonna march along with it, actually getting cover from that payload
Right.
potentially.
Because it's mobile heavy cover. So
Right.
although fitting more than like 6 or 7 B1s
Yeah.
behind a single payload is pretty difficult.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It'll be a maybe if you get covered. Just it's not
Yeah.
very wide of a
Right.
terrain piece.
Anything else?
I think everything's pretty good at it. Just not rebels, not rebel white saves. Rebel core units,
Yeah.
I'll say.
Yeah.
Everything else in rebels, I think, is still okay at it.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I think we did good, boys.
I think we spent about 3 times as much time on Sabotage as we did on the other one.
Well, I
It
think
deserved
that's
it.
yeah, I think
That's
that's
okay.
the only one that's the most like you said, right? Like all these other ones are more like home run games. That one's more small baseball. So I think it deserves more attention.
It's more like soccer, not even.
Soccer.
It's like no scoring, and I love soccer, so I feel
There you go.
dirty
Soccer.
saying that.
It's like
No,
soccer.
no.
Whenever I think of soccer, I think of that Simpsons episode where the dude is calling the game and they're just passing the ball back and forth. You've got like the American announcer who's getting like progressively more bored. Like forward passes to center passes to forward, and then you got like the the football guy who's like getting like he's just super excited and animated about everything. To me, for soccer, I am the guy that is bored, but I'm sure that's what a lot of people are for baseball. So
Yeah.
I one of our kids is playing soccer for the high school team, and I have grown an appreciation for it since he's been playing, because it's now that like my wife, she was a soccer player, so at first I was like, no, I'm good. Like football, baseball, I got the classics, basketball, and then she's like, no, I think you'll really like it. I was like, okay, yeah, I do now. I'm a fan now. I really
Yeah.
like soccer.
would you say there's a lot of minor nuances about
Oh,
the positioning
Oh
and
my. Here we go.
At a high school level, no. maybe at a pro level.
I'll say this, and this is why I didn't compare soccer to Sabotage earlier, because I do love soccer and I'll enjoy it, even though it is low scoring. But Sabotage is like soccer if you could place big walls in front of the goal and just like hide behind them and not kick the ball, but just stand in front of the ball. I don't know. This analogy's falling apart, but it's
Quickly.
I'm trying.
It didn't even we didn't even have to talk. It just
It didn't even start.
How
no,
about we
it
end
just
this
drove
episode
right off
before
the
we get
cliff.
even more off the rails? You guys got any final thoughts? Not related to soccer or Sabotage?
No.
Hey, get your Legion on. We've got only so many months before Worlds, so get your games in if you're planning on going. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a last chance qualifier there as well if you haven't gotten your tickets yet or won't have them by then. And you guys should practice. We got a big tournament coming up, and it's going to be amazing. I'm really excited. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm sure we're going to do a prediction show, but get your games in, get your reps in. I mean, the game's going to be different by the time we get there, because Boba and Din and IGs and
maybe like Dark Troopers and stuff like that.
Oh, Dark Troopers could be really right. Yeah.
It probably won't be anything that we haven't seen by now.
No, maybe Cody.
I don't think so.
But we've seen
yeah.
him. We've seen him.
Yeah,
already
well, that's what I'm
for
saying.
the
We've
most
seen.
part. Yeah. Just their cards, right? Like we don't
Right.
really have. Yeah.
Right. It'll be cards
Mhm.
we haven't seen, but no units we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
Unless
it'll
there's like units that come with Cody and all that.
be- yeah. Yeah.
Maybe.
But it's still gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
I might have to buy some speeder bikes after playing a few more games.
God,
of Blizzard
it's
Foils.
it is gonna be the Wild West. Like I know I keep saying that. But I can't tell you what I mean. I could not predict what is gonna win Invader League. I mean, with Kyle playing Blizzard Force, maybe that, but other than that, I can't really predict what's gonna win Invader League, and then let alone I don't even think there's a meta right now, man. Like there's so much out there.
I agree. I feel like I don't know. We can have this discussion on another episode when
Sorry.
we're not already over
Yeah.
time. But yeah, I think the meta is in an interesting spot where there are clear distortions in which things are good and which things are not.
Yeah.
But there's also not like the list of things that are good is reasonably large.
Yeah.
So, it's not like I could certainly say one of these 5 things is likely to win Invader League. But it's it's not like Rexstar where it's like, yeah, Rexstar is probably going to win Invader League.
Right.
Um,
Well, and they're not even like full list. Like Rexstar's a list archetype, right? Like I
Yeah.
think when you say one of these 5 things is going to win, I think you're naming a unit, right? Like you're probably going to say one of these 5 units is going to be in the winning list. But the arc, the build of the rest of that list could vary widely. I think not widely, but could vary.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe.
I get what you're saying.
Like probably Pikes are going to be there if they don't nerf them by then.
Yeah. I'd say
Yeah.
some combination of Pikes, Boba Fett, or Blizzard Force. Those are my picks. My picks to click.
Yeah.
But Pikes could be. There's so many lists. I have a Pikes
Yeah.
list. like
I know everybody can take them.
Yeah.
Except the
Anyways.
Battle Forces. Thank goodness.
Oh God. Yeah, that would be bad.
Yeah, that would be real bad. All right. Well, we are the notorious scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Jay.
I'm John Bushfax Bushman.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.
Wow.